Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We're a couple minutes late. We were listening to that tweezer again from last night. We are here to recap Shoreline Night 2. I have my friend, my colleague, um, my brother in arms in terms of fish, Brian Brinkman's going to join us in a second. Um, I think, as always, please put your comments and questions into the chat box here. I wanted to say happy college football season to those of us who celebrate. It's a very exciting day here for me and maybe for some other folks. Okay, so we're going to talk about Shoreline Night 2. Yesterday we stirred up a bunch of conversation based on some stuff that I said, and we're going to keep it going today. So I'm going to add Brian in a second. This is brought to you by Shift Genuine Cannabis. There are 2 days to enter the Las Vegas contest. So if you want to go to Vegas, you can win 2 tickets to the 30th, 2 tickets to the 31st, airfare, accommodations. Go to shiftcannabis.com. And then in the lot on Sunday, actually, I'll wait to talk about that until I bring Brian in because he's going to be there with me. I also want to say that I'm having so much fun with this. It's a privilege to be able to do this, and we've been doing the HFPod obviously for a long time. But because of Shift, we get to do this every day, and this is one of probably 20 things that I do as CEO of Osiris. But it's at this point, it's the most fun I'm having all day doing this and having these discussions. So I appreciate everyone participating in the banter because it's a lot of fun. All right, Brian, hello.
RJ, how are you?
Great. Fantastic. Brian, before we get into the show last night, can we talk about this event on Sunday? Because we just announced today all these, the music and everything else that's going to be happening. You're on the ground there in Denver preparing. Can you tell people a little bit about what to expect on Sunday in the lot?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is something I think we've been wanting to do for a number of years, and it's really cool that it's come together. You were talking before I came on about how great it is that Shift brought HF Pod back, allowed for this kind of daily conversation that we're having around Fish Tour. I would say that there is huge of a part, if not the reason, for us doing a live show on site, which is really awesome. So we're going to be on site Dick's Sunday afternoon at the lot. It'd be you, me, Tom, a few other people. We've got a few great guests lined up that I've been talking with that I think people are going to be interested in their thoughts on summer tour and kind of, just larger conversation around where Fish is at this point in time. We'll have some music, and then we will be announcing the winner of the Shift Genuine Cannabis October 30th and 31st contest, the HF Pod in Vegas contest, if you will. We're sending 2 people to October 30th and 31st, and $500 towards airfare plus hotel. It's a pretty sweet deal. Those are 2 huge nights in Fish history.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I will say that we can share now that we're going to have live music at this event. Steve Pollock, Dude of Life, and Andy Greenberg have started a project called Space Armadillo. They're both going to join us in the lot and talk about this project, talk about fish, talk about, all kinds of other things. And then they're going to play music for us. So there's going to be live music. I think my friend Chris Pandolfi is going to stop by and say hello. We're going to have some guests come through and talk about fish and talk about whatever else comes up. So it should be a fun afternoon. All right, Brian. So leave it to Fish to turn what could have been basically was a disaster of a 2-night run in Tahoe and turn it into an instant classic 2-night run at Shoreline. Do you see it like that? How do you see those 2 nights at this point now that we're looking forward to Dick's?
To quote one of our favorite people on Twitter, I think that, and I ran the numbers on this, so I think that it's accurate. I think this is the best 2-night run the band has played since SPAC 2004. The 2 runs, and obviously there have been a lot more 3-night and 4-night runs in 3.0. So, you could kind of split it up in some ways, but if you look at just 2-night runs, the only 2 that came to me that compared to what we saw, but I don't think were as high quality, were Worcester 2013, fall tour, amazing fall tour 2013, 2 great shows at Worcester, and Atlanta 2015, which features one of our favorite shows, the 731 show. I'm pretty high on the August 1st show as well. Those 2 are the only 2 that really come up as just back-to-back we usually see the band play a strong show on a 2 night run and then a show that allows them to play a few more songs, maybe doesn't flow as well. You don't go back and listen to. I'm looking at the set list right now on fish.net. I just listened to the Tweezer and the Cities again. I see myself listening to these shows in the same way that I do that Spaco 4 run, where next year, August 31st, hit and play on the first night of Shoreline, hit and play on 9/1 as well, and just will have that vibe. So I'm very high on these shows. And to your point, it was a disaster. This might not have happened, and we're so lucky that it did.
Yeah, that's the Atlanta 2015 run is a great comparison, mostly because partially because each of those shows have this like giant jam, to go back to the Kill Devil
Yeah.
Falls and the Tweezer. Yeah, man. I mean, it's pretty fun. What do you think about last night compared to the night before in terms of the first set? Because I thought the first night, the first set was just sort of out of the gate, like really well, the great, great song selection, great playing, and seemed really prepared to kind of go out there. Did you feel the same about last night, or what was your thought on the first set?
Yeah, I thought the first set started really strong in a similar way to the August 31st show. Obviously, like opening with Glide, there's so much baggage and history with that song that, like, when they opened with it, knowing that these shows were rescheduled, there was like an added weight to it. Anytime Forbins comes in, like, you just kind of lose it as a Fish fan. And, but opening last night with Mike's the man who stepped in yesterday, Avenu Malkenu and Weekapaw is a really great opening to a show. And I thought Weekapaw showed like a lot of patience. The mics had a really cool first jam off of it. I'm a huge stan for Brian and Robert for a litany of reasons that I won't run through here for the purposes of time and interest of our listeners, but I love that song. I love
I
Thread.
think we can point people to some podcasts where you elaborated on that.
The cities and the passing through. I love that jam. It kind of matched for me in the stash quality from night one. So I think if you like listen to them back to back, maybe there's an argument to be made that night one had that more like special historical feel to it. But I thought that there was plenty scattered across the first set to make it something I'd listen to in full again. How about you?
Yeah, yeah. I was listening to the cities. I listened to it twice this morning, and I usually I go back and listen to the whole show and then sort of move on to the next whatever I'm listening to next. But both nights I've gone back and listened twice. I just think there's a lot there. I feel like the cities was it was, I don't know, again, like sort of a different sounding jam. It didn't remind me of like anything that they had done the night before. It feels like they're getting into these sonic textures that are pretty different and driven by the individual songs, as opposed to like taking a 3 minutes of a song and then just going off in another direction. I don't know. The Soul Planet reminded me of that too. Like they were kind of in Soul Planet for 10 or so minutes before they start pushing outward. And I thought the cities and then the Tweezer were kind of the same last night. But I noticed the second time through cities that Mike was the one pushing them into passing through, which I didn't notice the first time, but he was definitely like leading them there. And I don't know how often that happens. I feel like it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, it's one of the funny things about like hearing a jam and a transition like that live and then going back and listening to it, because listening to it in the moment when Trey started singing passing through, my initial thought was, oh man, he got that melody in his mind and went with that. But I definitely agree, going back, there's a lot melodically from Mike that is pushing them into this kind of major key jam that cues up passing through, a song that like hasn't been played that often, but when it shows up, it seems to pop up in really cool areas. I'm thinking immediately of the Charlotte show from summer 2019, which was a highlight of that tour. And there's a passing through in the first set that I believe comes out of a Tweezer jam. I don't know. It's late in the first set, and it added a similar effect to this, where you're at a high already with a jam, and then you have this really nice segue into a new song that just like emotionally keeps you at like a high level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's amazing to me that the last two nights have inspired so much, I guess just conversation. I do want to go back to the Soul Planet quickly and just say, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to post something in the chat box. If you want to hear or read a really actually detailed description of what was going on in that musically, I'm just going to post a link to Drew
Oh yeah,
his breakdown of of what was going on in that Soul Planet, because he is much better at describing music than I am, and I really enjoyed reading that. Um, I'm just going to put up another comment here. David, who was on yesterday, said that Trey walked over toward Mike and was either saying something or just paying attention to what Mike was doing. I didn't watch either of these webcasts. Did you watch them?
I watched both of them. One thing I noticed, and you were hinting at this when you were talking about how long it felt like they were in the cities or the Tweezer or the Soul Planet the night before. Watching the cities, it's the first cities since I don't remember the last time they played it in 2019, but it was 2019. I think it might have been MSG. Um, and there seemed to be just so much patience and pleasure the band was finding just being in the groove out of cities, and they just kind of slowed it down and allowed the groove to really just like drive them in whatever direction they were going in. They were in no hurry, and I was sitting there thinking as I was watching it, and I felt it when I was re-listening here this morning. There's a lot of conversation right now about, oh my god, all these huge songs are off the table for Dix. And if there's anything I'm really enjoying about the first 5 shows of the second leg of the tour, and we talked about this in our episode that went out on Tuesday. I don't really care what song they play as long as they play with the patience that they played in that cities. Like they could play a set list of songs that I have no interest in hearing in isolation. And as long as they approach it with the patience that they're approaching so much of Gorge night 1, uh, both nights at Shoreline, those are my highlights so far of this leg. I'm going to be happy. And that cities, they could have just stayed in that groove. It almost, it's not a direct comparison, but it almost felt like that space in between China Cat, Sunflower, and I Know You Rider, where like the
Mm-hmm.
74 versions just get stretched out for like 8 or 9 minutes. And I just want to
Mm-hmm.
live in that musical space
Yeah.
forever. And I felt that in the cities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the patience is, I talked yesterday about why I think they're amazing right now, but the patience is one of the biggest parts. I just don't think they're in a real hurry, which is really cool. Um, all right, so the tweezer, well, the lizards first, and I was tweeting about this while I was listening to it. I like this like play a warm up song. The
Yes.
the cynical take is that it's they do it on purpose to get people to not be able to see the big jam because they because they only show the opener.
Right.
For a band who's always tried not to mix their art and commerce, I think that would be an interesting move at this point. But
Well, and they screwed it with playing a 50-minute Soul Planet
right,
as the opener
exactly.
the night before. So.
Exactly. They're like, shit. They missed the Wilson before that.
Right.
So that tweezer, the only words I could come up with was it was like a little bit more of a delicate jam than the Soul Planet. It wasn't quite as like hard, heavy hitting. It felt a little bit more. I'm not sure. Like Trey's playing was just like it was very delicate for most of it. It got kind of crazy there toward the end, but that's what I was thinking during it. But that's probably not the best way to describe it. What did you think of that jam and how it developed?
No, I agree. I mean, I think, the comparison that we were talking about earlier to that Atlanta 2015 run, the Kill Devil Falls on the first night was so dynamic. And it was like every riff Trey was hitting just kind of exploded out of the venue. And then the Tweezer on August 1st, 2015 it doesn't really peak at all. It kind of just goes through a number of sections and it's really just the band kind of communicating and throwing ideas at each other. And I felt like that in the Tweezer. Um, the analytical side of me, I two of my best friends just arrived last night for Dick's. It's our first time hanging out since Dick's 2019, and we got home and we immediately started watching the show. And we're listening to this show differently than we've probably listened to any show previously this summer because whatever they play this night probably isn't going to show up at Dick's. So you're getting people who are like, man, I really wanted to hear a Mike's. Oh, I would have loved to hear Cities, so on and so forth. And when Tweezer started, I thought this is a really interesting case study into, was the Soul Planet an isolated experience or are they actually trying to really push jams? And I felt like the Tweezer was a bit more intentional in their desire to push it outwards. And
Hmm.
I think as a result of it, there weren't as many dynamic segments as you got in the Soul Planet, but throughout it was really enjoyable, even as you got to that super spacey, distorted segment around like 28
Yeah.
minutes that was kind of, if I can hear like just 3 minutes of that this weekend, I'll be
Yeah.
so happy.
I felt like that and parts of the Soul Planet jam from the night before were sort of influenced, or at least in my mind, influenced by all the split open and melt stuff they've been doing this tour. You know,
Totally.
like just pushing into this really crazy dissonant space for a little while. But they're not the jams aren't really like dissolving out of that. I mean, I guess last night's did more than the Soul Planet did. Because typically, if they get into that, it's just sort of like cacophonous, and then it dissolves into the next song. It seems like it's more of a segment though at this point.
Yeah, I feel like they've learned a lot from Split Open and Melt over the last few years. It was a really challenging song for them to play in early 3.0 when I think what you're describing, like a noise jam would just become that. It would become a lot of like competing volume swells and, they didn't sound necessarily hooked up as like they were kind of fighting against each other. And around 2018, you had Page's, new synthesizers and his
Yeah,
new rig. Trey was playing with like the Leslie, and they were suddenly at a point where they could take that noise jam into a more melodic, blissful area. And now you look ahead 3 years, and there's been further development of it, and you hear it in the Simple from Deer Creek. You hear it in the Split Up and Melts from this tour, but also the Tweezer and Soul Planet.
yeah, that's a good point. And the technological aspect of it is another reason why I think that it's, in my opinion, this is the best Fish to listen to, just because there's so much more going on. It's so much more dynamic because they have more stuff to draw on. I also think like Trey, his rig is like pretty fine tuned at this point, and we've talked about this before. Like the use of effects seems less gratuitous at this point. It's like a little more balanced. Like they bring him in at specific times and then out. I've been hearing much more of just Trey's tone, Um, although last night had a little bit more than the night before.
There was a moment in the Tweezer, I don't know the exact timestamp, but I was just there. There was a camera right on Trey, and he was so focused on hitting this riff that he had come up with, and breaking it into various segments and then repeating it, and he just hit every note, and there was no effect. It was just his guitar. It's exactly what you're describing, and it was so pleasant to listen to. And it's moments like that that, like, when I think back to early 3.0 and the challenges that the band was having at the time, and I think about what I love about 1994 and 1995, it's Trey as a pure guitarist, and you
Yeah,
hear it
yeah,
intermixed with him using his effects in a really cool
yeah,
way.
yeah. What do you think about the landing into "Miss You"?
So I think the ballads have been amazing this tour. I've said that numerous times. I'm blown away by how much patience and how much space they're giving to their ballads, and I think they're really utilizing them, every single ballad that they've played this tour, as an opportunity to further connect and experiment rather than just like an opportunity to take a breath. Combined with that, I think "Miss You" is one of the best songs that Trey has ever put out there. I think it's one of the best Fish songs of the last 6 or 7 years. It's so straightforward and subject matter. Like, I think if anyone's ever experienced what Trey is singing about, like, it really, really connects with you on a very deep level. The Bob Weir version obviously connected. All this to say, I loved it as a landing band.
Yeah,
How about you?
it's a devastating song. I mean, I associate it with my dad who passed away. But 6 years ago now, and it's just like, man, the lyrics are so. It's probably the Trey. I mean, Trey continued this trend with "Ghosts of the Forest." The very straightforward, very vulnerable, and open lyrics. But I feel like this was like a preview of the "Ghosts of the Forest" material. It was just like, this is how I'm feeling, and it's well written, but it's just very straightforward in a way that's really powerful. I don't know. I think I haven't seen it live in a while, but I feel like I would not do well at that moment in the show. I would just
I
start
haven't
hugging the
when
person
they've
next to me.
Yeah, I haven't. And you're right. Like, I was thinking about that last night. I was like, the first, I think I saw the debut at Wrigley Field 2016. And I don't think without this song, he wouldn't have been able to write what he did on Ghost of the Forest. And,
Yeah,
there is something about, there's almost an Eddie Vedder quality to the lyrics that Trey is writing in songs like "Miss You," where he's not trying to be There's no like artistry, there's no color. He's literally just saying what he feels and then singing it. And that there's something really special about that. It's just a direct emotion getting to you. And it's something that, whatever what you've experienced, what I've experienced, what so many listeners have experienced,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways to interpret it. And that's really special.
Yeah, even though it's very straightforward, like there's not a lot of
Right.
metaphors in there, but it still leaves it open for interpretation.
Right.
Um, so I do want to go back to this comment from Nickel Weiss about the sound. They're listening better and providing complementary support, and I think that's one of the themes for me. It just sounds to me like there's just a lot of listening going on. And again, going to Drew's breakdown of the Soul Planet, there's a lot in there that I learned about how what he listened to in terms of them listening to each other. Um, so Brian, I feel like the rest of that second set sort of like just happened. Nothing really jumped out at me. It was sort of after that tweezer, I'm not sure what else you could expect. But did anything stick out to you in those, the Piper 20 years later twist?
I enjoyed the Piper 20 years later twist segment. I think it's one of those things that when you go back and listen to it, you'll be, surprised like, oh, there's real connection. They're really pushing for something. I think that one of the challenges sometimes with a show that has a jam that goes beyond 30 minutes is they put everything into that
Yeah.
jam and then the
Yeah.
rest of the show just feels complimentary. So ultimately, when I listen back to this, I will probably listen to the tweezer and maybe a handful of times we'll listen to the rain or the set, not to take away from it, but like the tweezer was so powerful. And conversely, on the 31st, Soul Planet goes into a really cool final hurrah. You get a huge Axela 2 bust out, Tila, and a Harry Hood jam that was phenomenal, that like makes that set a little bit more of a complete piece versus this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. And they end it with Numberline, which is always great. I hope we can hear that at Dick's.
I do too.
If they play it on Sunday night, I'm gonna find you. If I'm not already with you, I'm gonna tackle you and a lot of other people. um, so I want to, before we go into, we should talk about Dick's because it's happening tomorrow. I want to go back and put a comment up from our friend Mike Lawn Memo, who's the most famous Dick's attendee, I think, in my mind at least.
He is.
And Mike, I hope you'll come and talk to us after. What are you expecting? I mean, these are your first shows since 2019. You've been watching this whole tour, and now you get to go see them. And expecting or hoping or thinking or what do you? Yeah, where are you now?
I think, I don't think my perspective changed much since we talked on Monday, and just in the sense that I don't really care what songs get played. I have enough confidence in the way the band is playing that they're going to provide really fascinating outlets for improvisation, that they're going to string together really significant second sets, really, really interesting first sets. I said something to a buddy last night that we're all but guaranteed of at least one, if not two, solid first set jams. And that's something that you look 5-6 years ago, you were never guaranteed of that. It may be happening. It was like the biggest deal when it happened. But I could go through the majority of the shows this summer. Any great show this summer contained a first set jam. And that moment,
Yeah.
where like the band, it's still a little bit light out, you're 3 or 4 or 5 songs into the show and they go off into an exploration. I love that. So I'm not really worried that we're probably not going to get mics. I'm not worried that we're not going to get tweezer, Piper, twist, these like big songs that you expect to hear in a run. Maybe they'll pop up on Saturday or Sunday, but I'm not really worried that we're going to miss those, because the band has just showcased this tour that it almost doesn't matter what they play, whatever they string together, it's going to be fascinating. They're going to, they're going to showcase the patience needed to provide great improvisation. And that's for me, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's, in terms of songs, I mean, there's been so many great chalk dusts at Dick's.
Totally.
Simple. I feel like the Ruby Waves jam is due at some point soon. They still haven't played Bowie, right?
They haven't played Bowie since, I think, Atlantic City. I don't think we got it this leg.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for our friend Jonathan, The Bowie is waiting. It has to happen. It has to happen at some point.
If that's
On
that
this leg.
stash has to showcase that like there is an avenue out for David Bowie.
I hope it happens. But there's they're like you said, they're gonna figure out ways to jam. Mike says Plasma. That's a
It's
great
a good
call
one.
and would be really good. They played 190 ish songs so far, right? Something like
Yeah.
that. Unique songs. So there's plenty more, but they can also go back to a lot of those songs. So you're
My
right
white
though.
whale
That's
is forever Albuquerque, and I would do anything to catch an Albuquerque. I haven't played it since 2011. That is the bust out that I'm hoping for.
wow. All right. You never seen it live.
Never seen it live, and I think they've only played it a handful of times, but I just love Tonight's the Night is a top 5 album for me, and
Yeah.
I love how they play that coming out of jams like midway through second set. So if anyone out there who can get to Trey is listening, you know, Albuquerque mid second set on Friday night, I would just lose it.
It seems like in that post jam cool down spot, it would be great. I
It'd be
think
perfect.
I guess it's been 16 times, and yeah, last time was 2011, and I was out at that show at Merriweather. Um, well, I hope that happens for you.
It's a big
Light
hope.
a light is another one. Jeremy, thanks for tuning in. That's definitely again great song at Dick's. There's a lot of great songs at Dick's, right? There's a lot of songs that they've like just absolutely spotlighted at Dick's. So there's it's going to be great.
Carini will probably appear, and they've
Yeah.
always played really strong versions of that. So No Men in No Man's Land, they've played great versions. I mean, I think that there's plenty on the table, and I think the cool thing is, you know, they're playing a lot of older songs, but they're also playing a ton of new material still, and really showcasing it in great places. Like the great Adam Kaplan is saying, we need Mercury back in heavier rotation. Mercury is a great song at Dick's, and I would love to hear that.
Yeah, it really is. Hey, Adam. Hope you're well. Hope to see you out there. So this actually on Mercury, there's only been one version, right? Deer Creek. This tour. I feel like at the beginning of the tour, I was thinking that could be like a song that showed up every 4 or 5 shows and really got jammed out. But it's been a while.
Yeah, that song really owned like summer of 2019. And since then, it just hasn't. Yeah, there's been one version at Deer Creek, and I don't know if they played it in Mexico. I'm blanking on that. But yeah, that's a song,
They didn't
you
play it
know,
at Mexico. Yeah.
they didn't. For
Yeah.
me, the two best songs of the last 20 years are Sense and Subtle Sounds and Mercury. And we did get a Sense and Subtle Sounds with intro and a great jam out of it on night 2 at the Gorge. We haven't heard Mercury in a while. There's a recipe for a great second set.
A couple people, Justin, hey Justin, says a ghost. Another ghost. So I mean, ghost would be great. Well, vultures coming. And it seemed like Trey wanted to play vultures, and the
Interesting.
band said no. And Trey tried to play American Woman and started singing it, and the band was like,
No,
"It's
keep
not
jamming,
happening."
man.
Yeah. Here's a good question from Jeremy. Do you expect a gag? I was thinking about that this morning because it's the place for it, and they're in the right mind space for it probably if they wanted to do it, but they might not. I don't know. Are the gag days behind us? What do you think?
I mean, we haven't had a legit gag at Dick's since 2014 when they spelled out Lushington in the first set. So, they had kind of gotten to a point where it felt like it was kind of boxing them in on a Friday night. And it was clear, they played it the first set, and then the second set was just like its own thing. And felt
Yeah.
like from there they broke out of it. I guess you could throw in the encore on 9/6/2015. I'm always down for a fun gag. I think, when I went back to see Fish at Dick's in 2017, the 2017 and 2018 Friday shows are to me like the quintessential Dick's Friday shows, where I walk out of there just completely exhausted because song selection, set list, or song selection, jamming, and flow just completely owned the night. And you have no idea what's coming next, but they go into a song that jams in a really intense and cool way. So that to me is my ideal. But it'd be fun if they brought back a gag there. It is the home of spelling on Friday nights.
It is. It is. Jackson. Hey Jackson. Harpua unlikely. There hasn't been a Harpua in this tour obviously, but is that possible?
I don't know. I
What do you think?
believe the last one was Baker's Dozen. I think I saw the last one, unless I'm blanking on one in 18 or 19. But to Jackson's point, they did it there in 2015, and Harpua is kind of one of those songs where they seem to want to really pick their space for it.
Yeah,
There's a part of me that could
that
see
was a fun one
Harpua.
too. That was like
That
kind
was
of like that could be the last Harpua and it would be okay. I mean, just
right.
because it was so great.
I almost could see them doing it in Vegas. I don't think they've ever done a Harpua in Vegas. Oh no, they did. Sorry, they did 96.
96.
Um,
Yeah.
but it could be fun to see that like leading up to the Halloween gag. Who knows?
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, this has been fun, Brian. Anyone else who has any comments, predictions, songs they want to hear at Dick's or think they're going to hear? There's so much that I would like to hear. I keep thinking about Isabella. I just want them to bring Isabella back into the rotation, which is, you know, probably not that likely, but I feel like with Trey's new kind of improved setup, it would work well. So, but I guess he has about to run now, which I guess is like sort of the closest we're going to get to Trey Hendricks.
Yeah, About to Run is like Hendrix Cross with Crazy Horse, and I have
Yeah,
not seen that song yet. I would absolutely love to hear that. That's a great Ghost of the Forest tune.
yeah, it's really awesome. Bradford band is in a beautiful place, and the reflection in the crowd is palpable. Yeah, it's really fun. I hope that everyone has a good time out there. Maybe the other Axela at this point. Again, the Axela 2 was just, man, that was the gift to the nerdiest of which I guess is all of us.
I never thought it was coming back, and
Yeah,
it always seemed on the table like, why don't you just shake it up here and there and play it? It's kind of like the curtain versus the curtain with debate, like
yeah,
when they play just the curtain, it kind of adds an extra element once the song ends. Axela 2 throwing that in there here and there. But yeah, I absolutely love that they did that. It added just something special to that second set.
yeah. I think I want to just put up one more of Adam's comments
I love
about
that.
wider. Wider would be great. There's so much. I mean, there's so much Ghost of the Forest material. There's so much Lonely Trip material that still hasn't been
Green
played. So
Truth, man. Green Truth is a song I would love to hear them play.
yeah,
Beneath
I,
a Sea of Stars, like a huge version like we heard at Mohegan. That's a dream.
yeah, yeah. Mohegan had Wider and Sea of Stars, I guess, in the same set.
Very cool second
Maybe
set.
something like that. So Brian, now that we get to talk about fish, in front of people. How do you think about how you listen to or assess the band differently, having a sort of public platform? Because I got a lot of pushback on my comment yesterday, which is welcomed, and I don't take it personally. I think it's all in good fun. But how do you think about your opinion and how you communicate your opinions with like a more public platform than just like texting your friends or whatever?
Um, I mean, I think about it in a similar way to how I felt like I learned about communication with fish when I first got into fish, which was I don't remember how I discovered Fantasy Tour, but I remember stumbling upon it in the fall of 2001 when I was first getting into fish. And I remember learning very quickly that like if you had an opinion to share about this band, that you really needed to back it up and you really needed to have examples, and you were going to be called out if you just said something and didn't have like the history and the context with it. And so for me, communicating about fish, which was something I wanted to do from the start because the band just kept my brain working and it felt like this never ending rabbit hole that I kept diving down. To me, understanding the context of what you were saying and understanding the history and being able to provide that as an example with whatever it is, whatever statement you're making, was essential. That said, is like I feel like I've learned a lot over the last, I want to say, year or two. Um, I think I tended to allow my own expectations get in the way of my own communication about the band for a while, and I think I would get to a point where, like, if I was disappointed in something, I would showcase the disappointment rather than the rationale around what I thought the band was doing. And it took me a bit of time to realize that, like, the more interesting line of communication is trying to understand what the band is doing rather than simply commenting, this is good, this is bad, this is the greatest thing ever, this is not, you know, worth listening to ever again. Some, stuff on that sort of kind of binary extremes. Um, I'll also say, and it kind of goes in line with your comment that you made yesterday. I did an interview a couple of years ago with Tim Showalter of Strand of Oaks,
Hmm.
and we got to talking about how we'd gotten to a point with our favorite artists. For me, it's Bob Dylan and Neil Young, where I'd heard all of the young 20 something records that they put out that are just absolute classics. And I was spending a lot more time listening to their work in the 80s and 90s, a lot of which was panned and a lot of which they took a lot of risks that didn't work out. And I was talking about how much I enjoyed that material at this age of my, stage of my life. And he was talking about his manager, who's a huge Fish fan, by the way, who told him once, I don't care how great your most successful record is. I care how great your seventh record after your most successful record is. When you're like 42, 44, early 50s, what have you, where you're no longer cool in any sort of way and you're, um, you know, mining your own personal backstory and your own, kind of evolution and understanding of life and the world as you are going through it. And I tie that into where Fish is at right now. Like, Fish is in a point where there's a lot more emotions, there's a lot more patience required, there's a lot more like the friendship of the band, I think, comes out more than it did when they were 28 years old and just aggressively crushing every concert they were playing. And in some cases, I enjoy that, the nuance, the flaws, the warts that come with it, more than I enjoy throwing on a Summer 94 show and just hearing note for note perfection and adrenaline. And that is, colored my own criticism and my own communication about the band, because I want to be able to try to understand where they're at right now, why they're doing what they're doing right now in the context of their age and how long they've been playing music, versus just assigning a binary, this is really good, this is not so good. I know that was long-winded, which is, it's your fault for asking me a big question, but what are your thoughts on that? Break that
Yeah,
down as well.
I mean, that's really interesting, and I appreciate that thoughtful response. I mean, I think m- the the context in which we experience any art, music is going to color that, right? I think it's, I guess to me it's just all like opinions at the end of the day, and opinions can be backed up with your own evidence, like you said. It's funny that sometimes this gets compared to sports, like commentary or sports fandom, and it's just so different in my mind because sports have like concrete outcomes, right? Teams win or lose, they either make the playoffs or they don't. There's pretty tangible results that to talk about, and why those results happened, right? With a band, it's like, why would we, I mean, we do try to do that, we break it down, but in terms of whether they won or lost, there, that's going to be a personal opinion at the end of the day, and it's all subjective, right? And obviously if you're at the show, it's always a win pretty much, unless you're a really insufferable fan who gets mad at shows that you're at. But I don't know, it's just so interesting. What you said is true, the emotion and that's part of, probably I probably didn't say that yesterday, but I think that's part of it. Not just them, but also my own experience with it,
Right.
listening, doing interviews with Trey and understanding the way that he thinks about music. I mean, it's all like that all affects how I see the band. So that's all, but again, it's like my opinion, and I think that everyone should have their own, and if they think my opinion is bad, like that's great. I don't think anyone else's opinion is bad. Um, I just get to talk about it on this video thing, which is cool. Um, you know, um,
I mean, I
but
think, sorry to cut you off. Like,
yeah, no,
you,
no,
you talk
please.
you talk about like the sports analogy, and I think it's interesting because there is obviously at the end of the day, Fish is not walking away from a concert, and all of us are decisively able to say that was a win, that was a loss, that was, whatever. But I remember I spent a couple of years living and teaching in South Korea, and I hung out with a lot of people who watched soccer, and I did not grow up watching soccer. And I remember talking to someone towards the end of the Premier League season, whatever it was, probably like 2009, 2010, and asking them about the team that they followed. And I was like, "Was this a good season?" And they were like, "Well, yeah, it was a top four finish." And the concept of that is not something we think about in America.
Yeah.
If you think about, like, we're coming up to the end of the baseball season, there will be four teams left in the championship series. Two will go to the World Series. One will win the World Series. The only team we're ever going to talk about is the team that won the World Series. But those four teams that made it to the NLCS or in the ALCS had incredibly successful seasons and should be celebrated. They may not have had it in them, or the cards may not have aligned for them to win the title, but they had an incredibly successful season. And trying to understand that nuance in sports actually made me enjoy sports more, and it
Mm.
helped me to apply it to music, because the majority of teams that play sports do not end with a win. Most of them lose, and that's
Yeah.
how their season ends. And with Fish, like, there's obviously more nuance, but there is, like, there is a central understanding within the community usually of that was a really great show. Where the what interests me now is the nuance within it. What made it a really good show? What was the
Yeah.
context that made it a good show? Or what was this area that you may not have liked, but I loved, and here's why, like AK13 is saying in our chat, it's just all opinions. It's
Yeah.
all, and that's totally true.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's where, like, the discussion actually becomes interesting to me, rather than like the binary good versus bad.
I think that's a really good point, and trying to discuss it and break it down. That's kind of what we're doing here, or trying to do at least. I hope we do a good job. And I don't want to. We're not supposed to be doing this show to talk about the second season of Undermine, but it reminds me because the Undermine season 2 starts next week, and in the first episode, we start this kind of discussion about why ranking and why criticism of shows started in the first place. And it's a really good context for why Fish fans are how they are. And encourage everybody to tune in, because it's coming out on Wednesday, September 8th, and it's
Yeah.
really great. It's going to be an awesome season. And Brian, you've done a great job getting it to where it is now. But there's a conversation. There is a history to this. It's not just trying to be, super critical. There's a method to why we started ranking shows in the first place.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about this kind of offline, like, Fish is one of the, as incredible as it is that, like, Fish can sell out 25, 30,000, person arenas. They could play a festival just themselves in rural Florida to almost 100,000 people. Fish is one of, like, the only things culturally that I feel like I discovered organically, rather than someone, you know, advertised it to me, or like, "Hey, you're from Chicago, so these are the sports teams that you're supposed to follow."
Yeah.
Fish
Yeah.
was something that, like, it was very organically presented to me. I had to do a lot of work, as did a lot of other fans. Anyone who's gotten into this band had to do a lot of work independently to understand this band. And I think that there's, like, some ownership that people feel about Fish as a result of it,
Yeah.
that I'm really pleased with the discussion in episode 1 of Undermine, how we present that, because I think it really, to your point, it draws a lot of context into, it's not just people saying this is good, this is bad. There was reason for it, and there was an important rationale for it that I think it sets the tone in the season in a really cool way.
Yeah, and that's true. The ownership is interesting, and that's a really good point. So I want to keep hearing people's opinions. So we'll keep expressing ours, and we want to hear yours, and we're all right. And like Gerald, the comment I put up there from Gerald, we all win at the end of the
All of
day.
us.
Okay, so I think we are gonna go back to our lives and let everyone go back to their lives. And I just want to put up one comment, because on a much more binary um, basis tonight, I'll be watching the Buckeyes play, and I'll be yelling at the TV. And if they do lose, I'll be incredibly annoyed. Unlike streaming a Fish show, where I rarely yell at the TV. So this is apparently an Ohio State friendly chat. So thanks guys for tuning in. And Brian, thanks for joining. It was fun to talk. And I feel like we should do this again, maybe like in the next couple of days. What do you think?
I think it'd be fun. And if you want me yelling at the screen, join me in my next chat where I talk about the impending Bulls season.
Okay.
No, yeah, I think I think we should absolutely keep this going. This is a fun discussion.
Cool. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Brian, you'll be back on Saturday, right? With the breakdown of night one of Dick's.
Yeah, I'll be doing these Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Plus, we'll be live from the lot on Sunday. It's going to be a lot of communication around the upcoming fish run. I'm really excited. Friday night at Dick's is my favorite night of the entire year. It is so special. If I see you out there, you can give me a hug. It's okay. I'm fully vaccinated, and I'm ready to just embrace being back at fish again. I'm really excited.
Have fun, man, and thanks everyone. Everyone travel safely. Have fun out there in Colorado, and we'll see you guys on Saturday. And thanks for tuning in. And thanks to Shift Cannabis. Go to shiftcannabis.com. 2 days left to enter the contest, and we'll be announcing the winner in the lot on Sunday afternoon. Brian, have a good day, man.
You too, man. We'll talk soon.